Hi, welcome to Benson. I'm Edel McGurk and I'm here to tell you a little bit about Benson's green spaces. Benson's got quite a lot to celebrate in the network of green spaces around the village. Some of them are managed for the purposes of wildlife, some for recreation or even for growing food. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go on a tour of the village, taking in a quick look at the green spaces that we're managing and trying to improve for the benefit of wildlife. We'll also talk a little bit about what Benson's doing to meet the needs of its community in the future. The village is facing a lot of expansion and we're putting quite a bit of effort into thinking about what the community needs as it grows. So we're going to set off this way. We're going on a bit of a 4K loop around the village, and we'll make some stops along the way and talk to some of the people who are helping to make this green space network a reality. So here we are at Benson Brook, sometimes known also as Stream. Benson Brook is a chalk stream, which makes it quite a rare and fragile thing. There are about 225 chalk streams globally, and most of them are in England. And this one can lay claim to being the shortest chalk stream in the Chilterns. It's about 2.5 miles long. It rises up in Newelm, just up the hill there, and flows down through Benson to join the Thames just below the village. People love Benson Brook because it brings this spine of natural beauty the whole way down through the village. It also brings wildlife into the village, so occasionally we have herons coming to the brook, but also just up the hill here we sometimes see kingfishers on the brook, which is really lovely to see. An awful lot of the brook has been subject to hard engineering over the years. There are some natural bits, and later on in the tour we'll go and have a look at some of that just below the village. But up here there's been quite a lot of sort of concreting in. The bit up under RAF Benson's runway approach has been completely culverted donkeys years ago, probably as a measure to address bird strike risk. But we're keen, I think, with chalk streams these days to see a sort of a more naturalised setting, and that can be quite tricky to achieve in a sort of like an established village. There are some things though that we can all do to help look after the brook. Probably the most important one is for people not to pour paint can rinsings, detergents, chemicals down street drains or anywhere near the brook. Often those sorts of street drains drain directly into the channel, and they completely annihilate the invertebrate communities that play such an important part in this sort of ecosystem. The other thing that people can do is leave the vegetation in the channel. If we just have a look at this, this is water crowfoot. You can see the lovely white flower just emerging, and sometimes people think that vegetation in the channel creates a flood risk. But actually it's a really natural part of the chalk stream setting, and it creates this lovely sinuous morphology with riffles and pools and some nice gravelly areas for the invertebrates and the trout that people love to see in the stream to live and thrive. It's quite a few years ago, but there used to be water voles on Benson Brook, and particularly up the top end where we've got a local nature reserve at the Newelm crest beds. And one of the ambitions we talk about now and again is the idea of getting water voles back on Benson Brook. It'll probably be a bit of a challenge, but I think everybody needs an ambition to pursue. So that's one of the things that we've got on our minds for the longer term. So here we are at the salt store. The salt store is owned by Oxfordshire County Council, and contrary to what its name suggests, it's never actually used to store salt, but it was used to store gravel and other road building materials. So the salt store is special for all sorts of reasons. Public access is tolerated, so it's used as a sort of an easy route for members of the village to get down to the brook. But it's also quite a special sort of habitat that scientists call open scrub mosaic. And the reason it's special is that it's sort of unusual in that it has lots of bare gravel and lots of unusual plant communities as they start to colonise the gravel. So you end up with lots and lots of exposed gravel that warms up in the day and can be really popular for invertebrates and even reptiles to bask in the heat. It's also interesting for other reasons. So if we just come this way a little bit, and we're going to just look down to where the brook is. And recently, Oxfordshire County Council have had people in to pollard the willows alongside of the brook and maintain them. And it looks a bit devastated at the moment, but actually over time I'm sure they'll be back to finish the job. But when I look at this, it just screams adventure to me. So for those who are of a scouting persuasion or looking for a bit of adventure, I think it's got great opportunities for the kids amongst us. Now we're down at the bottom end of the brook, below the village, just before it joins the Thames. And what we're going to look at now is one of the other reasons why the brook is really important to the village. And if you come this way, what you'll see is that there's a path that runs the whole way along the brook from the village down to the road, the busy A4074. And the path goes under the road. And it's, I guess, what you would call a sort of reconnects the village to the Thames, which traditionally Benson had quite a strong relationship with the Thames, but that disappeared when the bypass was put in. But we've got this pathway that runs under the road, and it's traditionally known as the really safe way for the 10-year-olds to get to the river without having to take their life in their hands going across the busy road. And it's really beautiful as well. So this is where the path under the road pops out, and it comes out into this lovely bit of wetland habitat that we know as the Millbrook Mead complex. The parish council does a really good job here and manages a boardwalk that stops people getting their feet wet as they take this path to the river under the road. And there's a lovely meadow over here that we're going to go and visit next, and it's managed by Keith Tibbs and Tom Stevenson. And if we're lucky, we'll find that Tom is there, and we can go and have a chat with him about how he looks after the meadow with Keith. So this is Millbrook Mead, which is probably the jewel in the crown of Benson's green spaces, and we've come to meet Tom Stevenson, who looks after this meadow. So Tom, over to you to take us into Millbrook Mead and show us around.
This is a wildflower meadow originally set up by Ian Burles, who owns and looks after the gravel garden here. He planted it with wildflowers, I have no idea when, but once he gave it up, Benson Nature Group started looking after it. And looking after it doesn't entail that much. It's a mowing of the paths on a regular basis. And in the autumn or late summer, cutting the whole of this vegetation down to ground level and removing it, because if it's left to rot down there, then it just puts nutrients back in the soil, which wildflowers do not like. People seem to really enjoy coming down here and having their sandwiches, and especially during this lockdown period, I know a number of people have come down here for meetings. If you sit on diagonally opposite, you're almost exactly 2 metres apart, so it works quite well. But I think one of the major assets of this place is the insect population. If you were down here at this very moment, you could feel how hot and humid it is. It's very damp and sheltered from the wind, and this gives rise to a big population of just about every variety of insects, especially dragonflies, which are obviously breeding in the brook or the pond 20 metres away that way. But that and butterflies are really amazing numbers here, and quite outstanding for such a tiny little area. It's a wonderful place for group activities. We're getting probably nearly famous or infamous for our regular annual moth breakfast, where we have an expert from the Institute of Hydrology who comes along and tells us not only what the moths are, but almost their life history and what they feed on, and just about every detail you could ask for. And that's the attraction of that has increased over the years, from probably me and my dog originally up to it's getting so crowded now that I don't get a look at the moths. I'm so far back in the crowd. But it is a wonderful occasion. In recent years we've also had a bug hunt where the kids come down and wave their nets around and see if they can find bugs, and then we hope to identify them, and if we can't, we take a photograph and put it online so somebody else can identify it.
Lovely, Tom. Thank you very much for showing us around. So this is River Mead. So this is the last bit of publicly owned river frontage in Benson. It's got lots of picnic tables, and on hot days it's a real favourite with families. It also has a paddling pool just behind us, which the hard-working parish council staff fill every day in the summer months. So yes, a real draw for families, especially with small children. It's also quite a well-traversed spot, because it sits on the Thames Path National Trail, so we get lots of people passing through on their way up and down the river. Some people have come from far and wide to come and enjoy the National Trail. This is Warrick Spinney. You might know this site already, and some people might not. It's opposite McDonald's, just on the roundabout on the edge of Benson. You'll see a rusty gate with the sign on there. So this site was acquired by Benson Community Association as a Millennium Project 20 odd years ago, but it's now managed by Benson Nature Group. And we've got some plans here. We've got a big project underway already to make the site better for wildlife, and to start thinking about how we make it more accessible to the public and the people who live in Benson. So the starting point for us was to look at arranging some extra mowing of this central meadow. And we got some money from the Trust for Oxfordshire's Environment and Grundon's to help us do that. So we do some mowing with a contractor, and we've added some wildflower seed as well to try and boost what we're able to provide for pollinating species. So by pollinating species we mean bees, butterflies, moths, and flies as well. So all of those go up to make the pollinating species. So the meadow is one part of it. The other part of it is, if you look this way, you'll see a stretch of a shelter belt of trees and shrubs that we've put in along the edge of the site, and that's to act as a pollution screen as well as providing food for pollinators, because we've got a busy road running up along the side, and having a denser layer of shrubs and trees over time will shield the site from pollution and noise as well. You can probably hear the traffic as it runs past. And the next phase for this site is to look at what I mentioned earlier about making it more accessible for people. So the road to get here for pedestrians from the village, it runs out just as it gets to McDonald's, and then there's a really difficult, quite dangerous bend with no footpath on it, and it does put people off. So what we want to do is just make that a little bit easier, and we've got plans to put in a footbridge over the brook that runs just the other side of the site boundary, and that will connect up Warrick Spinney to the rest of the village, and also to the next green space, which is going to be our next stop. So now we're at the site of Benson's newest green spaces. So Benson's going to grow a lot in the coming years, and the building has already begun. But the neighbourhood planning team, which is part of the parish council, has worked really hard with the local authority and the developers working in the village to make sure that when we get new houses, we get really nice new green spaces as well. And we're looking for something that's a bit wild, something that's going to look after those pollinating species that we talked about at the last site. But we also want them to be great places for people as well. We want tracks so that people can run and cycle around them, but also just places for people to just to be outside, just for the delight that represents. So what we're going to have is a big swathe of green space that runs all the way up along that hedgerow and around the top, just to the top of the site. And that will ultimately connect up with a path that goes round the edge of the built development, connecting up with another new green space at the other side of the village, and hence creating a circle, a big loop all the way around the village. And then thinking beyond that wild green space that we want to create, we're also really keen to make sure that the village, the built part of the village, stays permeable to wildlife. So we've been talking to the developers, and we've set some policies around making sure that the built development makes provision for hedgehogs to be able to move between gardens, and swift boxes so that the swifts have somewhere to nest, and all those sorts of features these days to make sure that people get to enjoy wildlife in their day-to-day lives, as well as when they go for a long walk around the village. So now we've arrived at the final calling point on our tour of Benson's green spaces. This is called Bertie Westfield, and I think it's pretty unique to Benson actually. It's a little landlocked area just off a public footpath in the Littleworth area of Benson, and it was left to the children of the village for natural play by Mr. Bertie West quite a number of years ago, I think in the 80s. So it's a really special place. It's used heavily by the Scouts and by the children of the village. One of the loveliest things is this magnificent willow tree, which has been propped up and still provides endless entertainment. And then we have an open meadow area that the kids use to have campfires, and simply just to sort of like to use as a sort of a bit of a carpet really for play. The parish council manage the site, and they've recently established a working group of residents and scout reps and nature group reps to help look after the site properly, make sure that we make the most of having a place like this in the village. There are some plans to put in a ramp to help people who maybe aren't quite so able get in and out of the site. And there are also some plans to plant some hedging around the boundary, just to shield the site from local, so that the neighbouring residents have some shielding from the noise of the children playing. And we think it'll also boost the wildlife value of the site as well. We're here at Bertie Westfield Pollinator Garden, and this is Imogen Parker, who's led the work for Benson Nature Group on the Pollinator Garden. Imogen, tell us a little bit about what started this project.
This project's been running for a couple of years now. Previously, this area was a community allotment, but it hadn't been used for quite a while. It's owned by the parish council, and they gave Benson Nature Group permission to use this area for pollinators as part of our strategy. So we came in, we had a look, and there were already some plants here that I wanted to keep. Mainly herbs, but some other plants as well, like comfrey, which is good because it's drought tolerant and bees love it. And I worked out a plan to have some area of this as a sort of wilder, like a meadow, and then the rest of it more as a wildlife garden for wildlife gardening. And it's just developed from there. And I've had help from various volunteers. I've had a lot of plant donations. People have been very generous, so a lot of plants from Benson Garden Club and also from Benson Nature Group members and some of the parents at the school. And the idea behind it as well is to do with education. So it's a great opportunity for children to learn more about pollinators and the semi-natural environment. It's in a great location. It's really close to the school. It's just a few minutes walk from the school, and also right next to the Scout Hut. And also as part of Bertie Westfield, children use this area regularly, and they also appreciate all the flowers in this part of Bertie Westfield. And when it's opened up again after lockdown, they'll be coming in and using this whole area to play. So it's open for people, it's open for adults, it's open for children, just to appreciate this area. And I've had various people tell me it's looking very pretty.
Oh, well, that's it's really nice to hear. So well done for your work here, and thanks for telling us about it. This is pretty much the last port of call on our list of Benson green spaces to visit. It's called Sunnyside, and it's Benson's recreation ground. And although the parish council's been doing a good job of putting in some trees around the edge, it hasn't got a huge amount to recommend it from a wildlife perspective. But that's kind of to miss the point of it. It's a recreation ground, and it's really important to this community for junior football. The tennis club is round the corner. There's a big play area as well. It is the place where Benson Striders do their warm-up before heading out for runs on a Saturday morning. And it's also dog walking central at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. So this is pretty much the end of our tour of Benson's green spaces. We've come back pretty much to the place that we started now that we're at the finish, and we're just a little bit higher up. And this hill, as it probably passes for a hill in Benson, which is a village that lies very low in the river valley, this is one of the best vantage points in the village to sort of like to get a bit of a sort of bird's eye view of what it looks like. And I really love this place. It's a permissive path that runs through a cereal field, well used by the locals. And we have red kites overhead and swifts screaming, corn buntings and skylarks aplenty. It's a really great place. And the other reason I love it is that you've got this great view of RAF Benson, which is probably a surprise to most people in terms of the haven it provides for some types of wildlife. It's a semi-natural grassland, which has, I suppose, survived really because it's been fenced off from the public for 70 odd years since it was first created around about the wartime. And it's a splendid place really, and well loved by birds as well, which keeps the station staff really busy. We're looking just down the runway at this stage, from here, the main runway. The other thing that's brilliant about this spot is you've got a great view of the Whitnam Clumps, which are managed by the Earth Trust. and I just love the clumps. They're just a really iconic bit of the local landscape, and pretty much wherever you go, up into the hills or around the kind of the public footpath network around here, there's always a glimpse of the clumps to be had, and I just think it's really beautiful. And so in conclusion, I suppose this is really a story about a fantastic and diverse array of green spaces around a village. It's about, for us as a nature group, it's about connecting up those green spaces and making them the best they can be for wildlife, but also providing a connection between people and wildlife. And as the village grows, making sure that we get the best we can out of them for keeping Benson a really great place to live.